Okay.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast today, and welcome Achala for the first time to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Welcome.
I'm very excited to talk to you today about a very interesting scripture and your journey into the work that you're doing. And for the listeners, just for context, I've been diving deep into uh, Hindu mythology and been studying it and practicing as I've shared before. And I just, by beautiful coincidence, just a couple of weeks ago, found you. And what amazed me directly and what caught me into your YouTube channel and the sharing that you were doing, you were using mantras and your voice is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then
Thank you.
sharing the stories in a very deep and beautiful way. And I can really recommend if you are interested in or after this talk also want to learn more, I would definitely recommend Achala's YouTube channel, which is also called, is it also Discovering Universe and Achala and Govinda Das.
That's right.
So I can link to it in the show notes for everyone. But I just want to hear, we're going to get into the Devi Mahatmya and that whole beautiful story. And just for context, can you share a little bit about your journey into where you are now? It's so fascinating how you came into all of this.
So I always like to say that my spiritual journey like really started with me meeting my spiritual master, Paramahamsa Vishwananda. Even though I was on the path of yoga and meditation a little earlier, but I think that as you are diving deeper into yoga and meditation, it's so natural, at least it was always natural for me to try to go really to the core of every science and every teaching. And it became very obvious to me that it's impossible without a guru. It's really impossible without a master. So I actually had this wish in my heart that I would really love to have a guru. I would love to have a spiritual teacher. But when I had this wish at that time, I was actually 17. I was still in school, you know. So I knew that realistically, the probability that I will go anywhere to India in the middle of my studies, I was also in very demanding school, in music school, that it's very likely not going to happen. So it's something that will unfold probably some years forward. But actually, I was wrong. You know, it's always said that when you feel that strong urge to meet the master also comes to you. In a way, you never find a guru, the guru finds you. And since my Gurudev, he's a traveling guru, it actually happened so that he came to give a program, a darshan, exactly in my home city. Not even in my country, exactly in my home city, which was, I think, for the first time in that city. And this happened literally less than 5 months from the moment when I had that strong desire to find a guru. So for me, it was really, really impressive. And from that moment on, I just went really fully into that path because I was so inspired by him. And since my Gurudev, he always has so much love to so many different aspects of the divine. Although we belong to a Vaishnava lineage, but he always honors Lord Shiva during Mahashivaratri. And one of the most beautiful celebrations was and still is the most inspiring for me to experience with Gurudev was actually Navaratri, the 9 nights of Divine Mother. And I know that for many other devotees from our lineage, it's the same. It's just completely magical to have these 9 evenings when we are singing to her, singing mantras as well, and just trying to connect with her. So throughout that period of 9 days, traditionally also this beautiful scripture, or rather a part of the scripture, Devi Mahatmya, or the great story of the goddess, is also recited in a very particular formation. It's actually a part of a greater scripture, Markandeya Purana. So when I heard it for the first time, I was like, I really want to know more. I want to know the symbolism behind it, because that's also what my Gurudev actually taught me and teaches all of us, that when we read scriptures, it shouldn't be just superficial. We really need to try to go deep into that. We really need to try to understand what it all actually means, what is the deeper symbolism behind it. So that's how the journey started.
That's so incredible to have that happen early on in your life and that you've devoted yourself to it. And it would be interesting to know, as you began that journey, you tapped into one of the scriptures, and I mean that's a whole science and a big map of the all the literature that is. But maybe we can speak, just before we get into the Devi Mahatmya, a little bit overview. Maybe some of the podcast listeners today uh, know it lightly or not at all what we're speaking about right now. So from your studies, can you share a little bit about the different, maybe the different scriptures, and then, as you mentioned, there's different traditions and how they come together in a simplified manner. I think it takes a long
Absolutely.
time to study.
Absolutely. So, like the core scriptures of what we know as Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma are, of course, the four Vedas and their appendixes, which are the Upanishads. But they give up more of a straightforward knowledge. So, they give more the type of knowledge about the soul, about our relationship with God, which is like very straightforward. There are no really like stories or metaphors there that much that we can relate to. Then we have also other group of scriptures which came a little later and which are called the Puranas, or the ancient ones. And the Puranas are far more vast in this sense, because Puranas contain actually a lot of knowledge. They contain various stories of the divine. They contain various stories of different aspects of God. They even contain astrological knowledge. Some even contain Ayurvedic knowledge. So there's like really a lot in there. So they are very different in that context. And then we have also the Itihasas, which are the great epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana, but these are not, let's say, of the concert for today's conversation. So specifically, one of those Puranas, those really vast epics, is the Markandeya Purana, and it's actually one of the older Puranas. So it's considered to be a very ancient one. And there we have that great story of the goddess called Devi Mahatmya. And of course, the question may arise like, why exactly this story? Like, what's actually even special about it? Because there's so many stories in the Puranas, right? Like, why Devi Mahatmya? What is the significance and symbolism there? Because even in, for example, Jyotish scriptures or Vedic astrology books, we very often actually find that whenever a person experiences considerable issues from specific planetary placements, very often one of the biggest remedies that is given is specifically Devi Mahatmya, the great story of the goddess. So it makes it really, really interesting, right? So of course the question is why? What's so special about it? I would say the unique thing about Devi Mahatmya is also the way it's being structured. It's structured into three parts, which is dedicated to three aspects of Divine Mother, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati, who also preside over the three gunas, which are actually the part of our everyday experience. And an interesting aspect of that whole story, which makes it somewhat little similar even to Bhagavad Gita, I would say, is that majority of those stories, they don't happen in a very peaceful and calm setup. They happen on the battlefield, you know, which also represents, of course, the battlefield of life, the struggles and challenges that we are going through. So I can totally imagine that the way ancient sages envisioned that is that as we are reading through those very vivid descriptions, which really awaken our imagination, how the goddess deals with all those demons, because it's mainly just goddess killing the demons in various ways, honestly, the entire Devi Mahatmya, which has a lot of symbolism and many layers behind it. But as we are reading through that and hopefully imagine that in our minds, as we go through that story of killing the demons and the victory of the goddess, hopefully also something does transform within ourselves as well. Some of our own inner battles are also less effortful, hopefully, and something gets transformed.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to ask if there's a specific mantra you usually begin with before working with the scriptures, if you want to do it now, or we can get into the text. It's up to you. You have a beautiful voice, so.
Thank you. I personally usually chant one verse from actually Guru Gita, which is also a part of Skanda Purana, which honors the Guru, because I do believe that it is the Guru that unlocks all the knowledge. So we can start with that.
Yeah, perfect.
Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Gurur Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Thank you so much. Very beautiful and potent mantra. So I would love for us to, so just again, for little context, when I found your channel, where you also, by the way, for everyone who's listening, you share a lot of the Vedic astrology as well, right?
Yeah.
And but somehow, because I was listening, this year or last year listening to a lot of mythological stories, I found these different these 9 videos of the Devi Mahatmya, according, because it was for Navaratri, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And you grouped them into different chapters. So I would love for people to understand, and something that for me has actually been, like you say, it's these stories can be so beautifully integrated into our lives and our experiences. And I would just love to hear from you this particular scripture, maybe a little bit background and when it's from, and then maybe get into the actual stories, because I think it's so interesting to tie it with us and our journey as well.
Absolutely. So it's really interesting how the whole story begins, actually, because before even the story of the goddess, before we even dive into that, we are firstly going into the stories of a merchant and of a king who lost everything, actually. And it's really interesting because they got to experience the impact of Maya, or this world of illusion, in a very painful way. Both king and merchant experienced something similar, that people who they supported, like their family, people from their kingdom, they turned against them and they were banished from their own place, which is like a very distressful thing to experience for everyone. So these two completely unrelated people, the king and the merchant, they actually met each other in the forest, and they inquired from the sage, like, why does this happen to us? How this is even possible that people for whom we cared for, whom we loved, they can in a fraction of seconds just turn against us. And this is, I think, a really deep question to ponder about, because as much as all our relationships in life are, of course, very vital for us and very important, one thing that my Gurudev often says is one of the biggest tragedies, really of human kind of condition, is that they can change just like that. Somebody can just wake up the other day and decide they don't feel the same anymore. And of course, it's a very shocking and a very painful experience. So these merchant and king, they approached a sage in the forest and requested him to learn more, to understand how this is even possible. How this is possible that a human whom we cared for so much can suddenly just have amnesia and forget everything that's good, and really turn against us. And the sage beautifully replied to them that really everything in this world, all the material things which include our material relationships, they are all governed by the same energy, which is primordial, which is endless, which is Maya, and which is Goddess herself. That Goddess herself creates different bonds between different people, and that Goddess herself also makes people forget one another. So, of course, the king and the merchant, they got interested, they got curious to know more about this goddess who seems to be so full of contradictions. That goddess who can bind us in this world and make us forget everything, and that goddess who can also liberate us. So that's how the whole story begins, from really the situation of distress, which again reminds me of the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, where we have the same situation actually. Arjuna is in great distress, and as a result of that, the great knowledge is revealed, which I think is something really beautiful to think about, because I think in our own lives it's similar. When we really experience a shocking enough thing in life, a really distressful enough experience, it actually can become a gateway to knowledge, a gateway to higher wisdom. It can become a gateway to trauma also, of course, but there also can be wisdom that is born from that experience. And that is something very beautiful, that the king and the merchant, they decided, we want to actually learn more, we want to grow. Not that they had any other choice, they were stuck in forest anyways, so they could as well grow spiritually. But it's just interesting, and very relatable experience.
Definitely. I think many of us can relate to that story of having those attachments which is outside of us, and there's so many, and it can be physical, it can be ideas, there can be things that we are dreaming of having that we had. And then, I mean, from our own experience, we know that that's also usually what doesn't let us connect back to ourselves, because we're a little bit out there all the time. And then that the ego really wants to hold on to things, and to also, I mean, in their case, they could hold on to anger, resentment, and like the desire to have those things back, and then feeling also maybe let down. And I think many of us can relate to the experience of feeling disappointment, or feeling that others have wronged us, and that sense, and that can definitely bind us so strongly.
Absolutely. Especially the disappointment, right? The feeling like I invested so much of myself there and it's all in vain, or that's how we perceive it. That investment of time and energy is just gone. And in a way, it's such a powerful reminder that, in a way, yes, it is. Because it's like my Gurudev often says, we are all living in this bubble of forgetting that actually death can come at any time. And we will experience that breaking apart from all these bondages. We will experience that inevitably, because whatever didn't help us grow spiritually, we won't really take it with us anywhere farther. It's temporary. And having said so, of course, just because it's temporary doesn't mean we all need to just renounce everything and run into the cave. But while living in the world, at least we should try our level best to not be defined by those things. So they are at least not binding us so hard, and also so the distress after losing them is a little bit eased out.
Yeah. And I mean, the expectations after having had this yeah, if these people in the king and the merchant also being disappointed because you have certain expectations as well
Yeah,
on others, right? That's also
yeah,
very binding. And from that story, it leads into that understanding where illusion comes from. And it
yeah.
it's interesting how us who do we study these things, but it's so easy to get into that illusion. I know from my
Yes.
experience.
Yeah.
So maybe what happens like after that, and how do they move forward in this
Mm.
story?
So I find it incredibly, wise what the sage really replied to them is that this is just the influence of a Yoga Maya, of the great goddess. And then he basically continued on and carried on describing these three unique stories of the goddess in her three distinct forms, which essentially represents the three gunas of tamas, rajas, and sattva. Because we even read the statement multiple times in the Bhagavad Gita that the actual true self of who we are, the witness within, it's never acting. These are always the gunas acting. But it's sometimes, hard when you hear a statement which is abstract like this to really make sense out of it and understand what exactly does this mean. Like I see that I'm acting, I'm doing something, I have some willpower, some desires, we see some cause and effect. So what exactly does that mean? And stage describes it in a very symbolic way, but it's something that we can all relate to. Because what is happening when he describes those three stories of the goddess in her three distinct forms, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati? Mahakali is said to represent the Tamaguna, Mahalakshmi, the Rajaguna in this context, and Mahasaraswati, the Sattvaguna. Now, when we think of goddess is described in all Hindu scriptures basically as Prakriti, nature herself. And that nature itself, as Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, is Gunamai. She's made of the three gunas. We experience her through the three gunas because those three gunas, they act in us and through us at all times without our conscious awareness. So when Lord Krishna says in the Gita, the three gunas are always acting. He basically says the goddess is always acting. And to illustrate that, it's really nice to bring on a very mundane example. For example, if right now someone is going to throw a ball at you or some hard object, you don't need to think what to do at all. Your body automatically does this to brace you, to protect you. That's nature. That's something that's happening automatically and autonomically inside of you, which is why for me it was really interesting to explore the three gunas in the context also of our autonomic nervous system, because we all have those initial reactions that come through us whenever something happens. Whenever something desirable happens, when we feel with people around us who make us feel safe, we feel connected. In the context, for example, of polyvagal theory, that would be the ventral state, right? When we feel the connectedness, we feel the safety. That's what Sattva Guna essentially is. It's even so beautifully described in the Gita as when light enters through all your sensory organs and you just feel very light and content. And of course, we would love this guna to be predominant at all times, but it's not like that because we also do need other gunas to be present, to act, to perform through us. Then we have the Rajaguna, which is basically the state of activation and mobilization. We can compare it a little bit to sympathetic state or sympathetic nervous system, which gets a lot of bad reputation because it's usually associated just with those fight and flight responses. But there is also the idea of being passionate in Rajaguna, playful, the idea of actually really, feeling that inner fire to move forward and feeling really active. That's also the Rajaguna. So that's also the blessing of it. And then we have Tamoguna, which gets the worst reputation of all. It's usually associated with laziness, with that dorsal vagal state of shutdown and feelings like shame and fear and disgust that we really don't like to feel pretty much ever. But At the same time, it is the tamoguna actually that allows us, according to Hindu scriptures, to actually experience deep sleep, which is exactly when our body rejuvenates and recovers. It's that immobilization which allows tranquility and peace as well. So even that, is such an important factor because we always need to rest. We always need to know when to slow down. So all these three gunas, they have their role, and they have been literally identified with the goddess herself, which means they are not, just something for us to resist or reject or avoid. All of them have their function. All of them are important. And I think that when we read a scripture like Devi Mahatmya, where we read the stories of those three goddesses, we also learn to befriend those gunas actually and to honor them as also divine. And perhaps next time when we feel one of those gunas being very exaggerated, like when the big fear or the big anger comes in, hopefully we can relate to it, a little differently, with both a little more detachment and also more respect that I see you, I honor you, and I understand that you are important, that you are here perhaps to protect me.
Yeah. And I feel like in a month of a cycle that can happen. You can
Yeah.
feel all three of them.
Absolutely. We feel them more intensely for sure,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so powerful, and we see it in nature and in different seasons of our lives. So I
Yeah.
think it's in my practice at the moment, we spoke about it a little bit, the Dasha Mahavidyas, and
Mhm.
there's also the different qualities of, or the faces of the
Yeah.
goddess, and yeah, they have very different um, qualities in that sense. So, and I mean, from my studies in Chinese medicine and the elements as well,
Mhm.
there is a need for all of the elements and both yin and yang and that
Absolutely.
balancing. So it's the same concept. We can't be in one or like just be in joy, because then we get an imbalance in the
Yeah.
heart and everywhere in the body. So, do you know, I just love that story of Lord Vishnu in
Mhm.
this deep sleep, and because that's where it comes. So
Yeah.
these two figures, they come to this. It's an ashram, right, of
Yes.
this great sage, and then he's so why does he start to speak about this story? Like, what? How does that lead into these beautiful and captivating stories?
So of course, firstly, begins to talk about the goddess because he wants to make both the king and the merchant aware that this is a Yoga Maya, and Yoga Maya is Devi herself. But the first story that he narrates is really beautiful because it's really ancient. It actually happens in the very beginning of creation. And I think to a degree, this story is also a good answer for all the questions of the merchant and the king. Because basically, if we would like to kind of dump down what the king and the merchant are really asking, is pretty much like, why me? This is our default question when something distressful happens to us. Why me? Why did this happen to me? Well, how could this be possible? So then the sage brings the first story, and it all happens and unfolds in the first chapter of Devi Mahatmya. And it happens like before creation itself. So it's a really, really deeply symbolic story because in that story, we see a beautiful description of Mahavishnu who is reclining in his yogic sleep after one cycle of creation already has finished and before the next one started. So it's that transitional phase, which is kind of the same state I think that the king and the merchant find themselves in, because for them, one cycle of creation also has just finished. The new one didn't really start yet. And I think that we as humans, we don't always like to be in that state when something has ended and something new didn't really start yet, because we are like, who am I even right now? Like, what is my identity and purpose? So he brings this story in Lord Vishnu is reclining and sleeping on the Sheshanak, on Adishesha, which is also a beautiful metaphor. He's sleeping because that's the energy at rest. Lord Vishnu is from whom the entire creation is going to emanate during the cycle of creation. So as he's sleeping, again, sleep is the influence of Tamoguna, actually. So even on that cosmic level, we can see that gunas operate to a degree. So he is sleeping. That's the time of rest, when all material energy is at rest, when all the spiritual energy is at rest. And as he is sleeping, what is happening, which is also influence of Tamoguna, is that these two demons, Madhu and Kaitaba, then they actually come out of his ears. So out of his own very being, there are coming these two demons. And what they begin to do, what demons do best, right? They just create chaos everywhere, which is, for now, there's not much to create chaos in because the universe has not been created yet. So what they do, they harass Brahma, the creator, who again is kind of helpless. Like he didn't do anything bad. He's just waiting for his duty to start. And they steal the Vedas from here. And the Vedas, of course, is that intuitive knowledge inside of us. So the Tamoguna actually limits our access to that intuitive knowledge. This is when we are in this state of slumber, literally. And what does it mean to be in a state of slumber? We are not fully awake in the moment itself. We kind of see everything around us like, oh, I know it already. I don't need to pay attention to that. This is why, for example, in trauma healing world, it's such a common thing. One of the first practices you will learn is the practice of orientation. You relearn how to be curious and awakened and engaged with the present moment. So that Tamoguna kind of clouds it all. There's no intuitive knowledge. It's hard to relate to the present moment. And it's believed that even sleep itself, that Lord Vishnu is experiencing in that moment, is caused by that Yoga Maya herself. So Lord Brahma, in his wisdom, what he does in that moment, the creator, he is actually praying to her. He's praying to her who is not just Yoga Maya, she is the Yoga Nidra also, the yogic sleep of Lord Vishnu. He prays to her, please exit from Lord Vishnu so he can wake up and restore balance, because that's actually his duty. Lord Vishnu is the sustainer of the universe. So whenever any demons come through, normally that's his duty to maintain order. So there is no chaos, no imbalance. So he wakes up, and before he's able to do that, there is a goddess that literally exits from the eyes of Lord Vishnu so that he can open his eyes. And that goddess herself is Mahakali, but she's not described in any form in particular. The meditation on Goddess Mahakali, which describes her form, is just in the beginning of that chapter. But in the story itself, she is almost like at the background, almost like invisible force that we know it's there, but we can't really truly see her yet. We can't truly see her form. So after Lord Vishnu finally wakes up, what happens? He, of course, manages to destroy those two demons, Madhu and Kaitaba. And there's a lot of detail, of course, to that story, but bottom line, it turns out that it's impossible for them to be killed in any place that is filled with water, which is pretty much everywhere at this point. Because in Hindu mythology, it's believed that whole universe is kind of covered not by physical water, of course, but by spiritual waters of pralaya. So water is everywhere. So they are asking for impossible task. Therefore, Lord Vishnu takes them and places them on his lap, and he kills them there. But I think that request that demons are actually placed to not be killed in any place that is filled with water or in a watery place is a symbolic one as well, because we can't really reintegrate our own inner demons, honestly, in any other place than in our own lap. It really is like this. And at the same time, the water, of course, is such a potent metaphor of actual emotion and flooding and overwhelm. And of course, they say you can't kill us there because we thrive there, actually. You need to bring us back to you, and then you can kill us. Then only the balance can be restored. So for me, the most interesting part of that first chapter is that the whole story actually mainly revolves around Lord Vishnu. even though, of course, Lord Brahma invokes Devi, invokes the goddess, and tells her, please exit from the pores of Lord Vishnu so that he can wake up. But at the same time, she's at the background. She's not really visible. And I think it's very similar with how nature actually also acts in us and in our lives. It's very similar to how God acts in our lives, actually. It's always at the background. We don't really always see what's happening. We are not consciously aware of it. But we do know that there is some force inside of us that is stronger than us. And I think that the biggest proof of that is that if whoever is listening to this podcast right now, just honestly, if you think you have willpower, just stop thinking right now. And you can't. That's the thing. There is something that makes the thought happen. There's something that makes the emotion, the sensation, the feeling happen, which means there is a force that is stronger than us, that can bind us, but can also liberate us.
That's so beautiful and beautifully shared. Thank you so much for that. And you mentioned that it's interesting how there's aspects, because some people here might know about the Bhagavad Gita and that scripture, and it's very like well known in many yogic contexts. And here we have so in what I was taught was that in the Bhagavad Gita there's also this karmic element of the whole story. So it's karma yoga, it's bhakti, it's jnana yoga. And here in this part of the story where there is also a devotional, so I'm definitely a devotional practitioner. That's all, and also love the studies and the intellectual part as well. But I just feel like it's so beautiful that first of all, in my work, it's always been it's felt natural to speak about and to acknowledge and to raise the awareness around the divine feminine energies and that whole which we're lacking so much of in society, just in general, right? And here they're invoking the goddess, so it's so empowering, I think.
Absolutely. And it's such a beautiful prayer, like when Brahma offers his prayer to the goddess, he is really, coming from this very humble standpoint, he's actually humbled by her because he says, wow, your power is so great, because you are the one who makes us sleep and you are the one who wakes us up. And I think that we often kind of take it a little bit for granted, like when we have a good phase in life, it's so easy to believe that, it's just going to last forever. And we usually attribute it more to ourselves. We kind of forget that even that is grace, to be alive, to breathe, and to experience what we experience in life, because even that is possible only through that energy, through Prakriti.
Definitely. And here's also that I see the battles that are occurring in these stories are so much an inner battle, right? It's like this, it's growing out from ourselves, and this little voice that's always with us, and the voice of the ego and all the programming that we have, and how we can have that. I think many of us have that inner battle. And for me, like the heart that's something, when I have my yoga class, I always say that we drop our consciousness and our awareness into the heart, because it removes actually all those veils and layers of the mind that might hold us back.
Absolutely. I fully resonate with that because I also come from Bhakti path, and my Gurudev kept repeating. He literally said the first time when I met him in 2008 and 2007, sorry, and he keeps repeating it until today, that the most important journey everyone has to make, the most important pilgrimage is the 40 centimeters from head to heart. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
true. It's so true. And in the story, then it moves on. Can you remind me then that whole, of course, the goddess, she's everything, so she can defeat
Yeah.
these two. Uh, so this is the part where, so it's a very, like you said, it's this part of the Devi Mahatmya that is dedicated to goddess Kali, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I think that that's interesting to tap into. I think most people, when they see these modern depictions of Kali, is like,
Yeah.
I mean, it is powerful. I had a very strong sadhana with her, which turned everything upside down. So I think it is to face that very strong energy. But she's, I mean, her depiction is so. I would recommend everyone who's listening to this podcast to definitely go and listen into the stories through your channel, because you get the detailed
Yeah.
descriptions and depictions. But just to tap into that, and how then we move into more, so it's this fierce feminine, and then moving into that those other aspects of the
Yeah.
feminine.
Yeah, and Goddess Kali is, truly, mysterious in so many ways. I think that she literally is the goddess of transitions in life, because that's also what the Tama guna is. And my Gurudev spoke about something similar lately, and it really stayed with me. He said that those moments when we are really at the bottom in life, this is really the time for rest and recovery. And you can actually compare it, or let's say this action of tamaguna in this context, to when you place the seed in the ground. You don't see anything at all happening on the surface, actually. But inside, below the surface, that seed is literally going through explosion, like the most major, the biggest part of the transformation that is happening there. But we actually can't see it. And this is what is so interesting about this first chapter of Devi Mahatmya also, that although the goddess as Mahakali, she is invoked in the beginning of the chapter, she is praised by Lord Brahma, but we don't actually see her appear at all. She just does exactly as Lord Brahma requests her. She exits through the pores of Lord Mahavishnu, and then she just remains there as a witness, waiting, because she represents that moment of recovery. That's actually her function and her role. And it's so beautiful how few years back, actually during Navaratri, because traditionally the seventh day of Navaratri is also sacred to Goddess Kali. My Gurudev very beautifully explained that Goddess Mahakali actually, and you can find also similar statements in other scriptures, she represents the deep sleep state of consciousness. She's actually the one that allows rest to happen. And again, of course, we are resting. We think that we are, in deep sleep and that nothing is happening, but actually so much is happening in all ourselves. This is when they rejuvenate, actually. So big transformations are going on in that moment, but on the surface, it may not seem like it. And it's so powerful to think about it, that she's the black in complexion, like a black hole, literally, because black color is the only color that absorbs all other colors. And this is a really, interesting depiction. She has a 10 hands, at least that's how she's depicted in Devi Mahatmya. And they themselves actually represent the 10 directions of the world, which represents her spaciousness. She's omnipresent and pervades through everything, but not always visible.
Yeah, she's really a fierce uh, mother goddess.
Yes, absolutely.
And yeah, so and then from this story we move on in going into the next aspect. So they get the teachings from this sage around this part of the story, and how, if we weave that into the next,
Mm.
how what is the next level of teaching there?
So it's amazing to see that, of course, once you learn a little bit and something really captivates your mind, you want to learn more. And we see it in Devi Mahatmya, we see it in Bhagavad Gita, and in actually all the Puranas, that those stories, they do captivate our minds. So since they just heard the merchant and the king, such a mysterious, such a deeply symbolic story, they want to learn more. They want to understand more about the goddess. So they request the sage, please tell us more about her. And he continues to completely different story, a different instance when goddess appeared in a little bit more obvious way. So the next chapters of Devi Mahatmya are actually dedicated to goddess as Mahalakshmi, but not the same Mahalakshmi as we know it. So, like whenever we hear the word Lakshmi, we imagine this beautiful, really soft goddess seated on a lotus flower with lotus flowers in her hands. That's not the Mahalakshmi that the sages are talking about. That Mahalakshmi, she is powerful. She has 18 hands and she has only weapons in those hands. She's fierce. And it's important to know that those goddesses, they all have multiple hands representing how multidimensional they are, and that these goddesses in many esoteric traditions, they are seen not as just being in the outside somewhere there, they are actually inside of us. Goddess Mahakali, she is said to reside actually in first granthi or conglomeration of the nadis or energy channels in our energy body, which is actually the Muladhara chakra or the root chakra at the base of the spine. That's literally where Tamoguna sits with all its survival instincts there. Then the next such a junction of nadis or energy channels is in our heart chakra, which is known as Vishnu Granthi. And this is where goddess resides as Mahalakshmi. So this is where Rajaguna resides. And and actually the appearance of the goddess Mahalakshmi, how it's described, is very, very beautiful. So so firstly, what happens is that there is a great powerful demon who is basically harassing the world and creating chaos in the world. This is like a very typical situation in many Puranic stories, right? That there's one big demon with really big ego and he creates really a lot of problems. So that's exactly what is happening. And there's this really vivid descriptions that all the devas, all the gods, they are completely helpless. They can't fight with him. They lost all their splendor, even it's written, or tejas. They are completely without energy. And these I find to be very significant because the devas in particular, they are addressed, especially in Devi Mahatmya and in more traditional Vedic scriptures as core devas. It's always 33 of them. It's a symbolic thing because we also do have 33 vertebrae in our spine. We do have 33 of those nerve junctions as well happening there. So those devas, they are not in the outside. There's Indra residing in our hands, there's sun residing in our eyes, moon residing in our mind, according to all the scriptures. So the devas also represent all the different faculties of our body and the different senses, different potencies that we hold. So of course, when a big demon who represents actually the power of this really puffed up ego, because that's the demon Mahishasura, if he comes up and creates problems, and I think we all know that state. When we are in really deep inner conflict, we literally lose our luster too. We lose our tejas, we lose our energy to move forward. And it feels like all our internal energies, those devas, they're scattered all around. It's hard to kind of bring ourselves back together. It's even expressed in the language that we speak about it. Like we say like, hey, get yourself together, right? Like literally bring yourself back together. And that's actually what happens prior to appearance of the goddess. So those poor gods who lost all their power, all their energy, what they do, they all come together and they pray to her for so that she can appear in front of them. But they don't only pray to her, they use any remnant of energy that they have left, all those 33 gods, and they use their combined tejas to create one powerful surge and ball of light. So literally what is happening, it's like all our internal energies, they're mobilized in one direction. And again, that's the Rajoguna that we are talking about, the goddess of Rajoguna, of actual mobilization. So for that to happen, all the different fragmented parts of us, they need to unite for a single purpose. This is when mobilization can occur. And only from that combined light of all the gods, the goddess actually takes shape as a beautiful and powerful warrior goddess who is going to be powerful enough to actually defeat the demon Mahishasura. So I think that the appearance itself of the goddess is incredibly symbolic here.
Definitely. And it's that the power of so many aspects coming together, and I just love. Sometimes we can. I think that people who are on the path, it can feel strange to focus on like details and characteristics and things like that. But actually, it does it forms something that could be very abstract to us into shape, and then we can relate to it. And I feel like that I love relating to it and then seeing that power. And again, this story is also so empowering of understanding how this sometimes we have put aside the fierce power of the feminine, which sometimes is only or has been limited to being that beautiful, motherly, like those aspects. And then all of a sudden you see these incredible, intelligent, sometimes wrathful, but it's in protection.
Yes.
Yeah, those aspects. To me, it's been empowering to study that for all of these years and seeing how well preserved it is compared to traditions where it's been lost.
Absolutely. And it's so powerful to realize, that there is this Shakti, available and possible deep within us, but it takes from us, or what it takes from us, that scripture so beautifully metaphorically describes, is to really take all those energies that we have inside of us and just point them towards a goal. And this is where this Shakti can be more directed, more obvious in our lives as well.
It's beautiful. And then the story moves on into the next chapters. Because the scripture is we didn't mention that it's how many chapters is there actually if we look at it?
So when it comes to Devi Mahatmya chapters, it depends how you count it. So you have like core chapters of Devi Mahatmya out there, and then you have additional chapters as well. So some traditions consider this is a little bit more, this is a little bit less, like that. I'm just trying to find this information for you right now. So just give me a second so I can tell you the extra chapters and the additional ones.
Yeah.
So the core chapters, you can say that the core are 13. And then there is the 14th chapter, which is more like, it doesn't really describe let's say, any story of the goddess. It's actually called like the closing prayer. But so these are like the core chapters of the Devi Mahatmya. But actually, there are some so-called Gupta chapters or hidden chapters as well that were added very likely additionally to it. That it's speculated that it's actually not really an integral part of Devi Mahatmya and Markandeya Purana. But you could say like the core chapters are 13, and these 13 chapters, they are recited on the 9 nights of Navaratri. And then we have this last day, the 10th day, which happens after the Navaratri, where this extra 14th chapter is being also recited.
Beautiful. And now the story you spoke on now was, do you know which chapter? It's kind of in the
Yeah,
middle, right?
it's
Or is it
middle
in the
but
beginning?
beginning. So, so,
Mm,
so, so also I think it's important to mention at this point that the chapters were structured to also be divided into 9 days. It's also a
mm,
very common theme actually when it comes to Hindu scriptures. Some scriptures are supposed to be read in the period of 7 days, some for the 9 days. For Navaratri, for Devi Mahatmya, it's always the 9 days. So on the first day, we usually recite and read the first chapter itself. That's the chapter dedicated to Mahakali. Then on the second day, we actually read 3 chapters, chapters 2, 3, and 4. All of them are dedicated to Mahalakshmi. And then basically for the rest of Navaratri, we are reading the chapters which are dedicated to goddess as Mahasaraswati. So actually, for the majority of Navaratri, we are reading the chapters dedicated to goddess as Mahasaraswati, because also that battle is the most complex one of all of them. There is like so much going on in there, and so much symbolic stuff, which I think is very appropriate, because goddess as Mahasaraswati, she resides in the final Granthi, or the Rudra Granthi in our third eye chakra, in this junction here. She resides in there, and she presides over the Sattva guna, actually the guna which is the hardest for us to let go of. Because Sattva guna is not just the sense of our comfort zone and safety and connection, it's actually more than that. As Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, Sattva guna is our attachment to knowledge and our beliefs. And we have a lot of that in very different and very subtle forms as well. So also that whole, we could say, battle between Mahasaraswati and variety of demons, because she will not fight just one demon, she will fight many demons and in many different ways. That battle itself of the goddess takes a lot of time, and we could say it literally takes place in our mind itself. It's literally just the battle of unrooting everything from our mind that stops us from seeing the reality and God the way they are, which is why the final demons that goddess Asmaha Saraswati is going to defeat, Shumba and Nishumba, according to many scholars, they represent this final obstacle, the belief of I and mine.
yeah, those that story is very interesting and has come up. It is a long story, like you said. It
Yeah,
has many facets. So,
yeah.
and I think the best way of understanding that is through listening to your beautiful sharings and mantras around it. But if we can conclude that how the defeat takes place of
Mm,
those two and what they represent to us as well.
yeah.
Um, mm, I
So,
think it
so
would
there
be.
are, I would say, just to kind of really, highlight, a couple of demons that the goddess is actually fighting in this fight. So the whole story actually around goddess Mahasarasvati is that she appears in this really beautiful form. She's seated on the mountain. Again, such a beautiful symbol, right? The mountain represents our own spine. So she's seated there on top. And then these 2 demons, actually, they're not them directly, but one of their servants, these 2 demons who are again harassing the whole world, Shumba and Nishumba, representing the I and mine within us, the attachment to our ego. They are informed by their servant that there is a beautiful maiden, and she's the only one worthy of becoming your wife, companion. And of course, they want her as their wife. But she says to them, well, I'm very sorry, but I made a vow that I will marry only the one who can defeat me in battle, which is, of course, such a powerful statement here. And of course, they try to convince her in a variety of ways, but she says, I'm sorry, I just took this vow. Battle with me, fight with me. And it's, even at this stage, it's so symbolic, because what the ego, the I and mine always wants is to possess power, essentially. That's what Shakti represents, the actual power. But she says, you can't if you don't defeat me, because if you don't defeat me, it means you are not worthy of me, actually. It means you are weaker than me. How can you be my husband? It's not possible. It's the same how our ego is trying to possess, that Shakti, that power within us. But that divinity inside of us is higher than this. So how can it possibly be a match? So of course she resists, and therefore what Shumba and Nishumba, in short, what they do, they keep sending different demons and big armies also. So these demons, they don't come alone, big armies of demons to try to defeat her. The first demon that comes is called Dhumra Lochana, and it's so beautiful actually name, Dhumra, smoky Lochana, eyes. So Dhumra Lochana, the one who can see clearly, who actually tries to cover our vision so we don't see. But she defeats him just like that, with a single syllable, with a single word, and his entire army. Then there are two other demons that are coming, Chanda and Munda. Very interesting names, really, because those demons kind of, represent, again, those very dual qualities actually inside of us, but also they do represent the idea of being too stuck in our own minds, because Munda, of course, also represents the skull. So too stuck in our thoughts, in our expectations. And then comes a really interesting demon. So Chanda and Munda also defeated quite effortlessly by the goddess. Then from chapter 8 onwards, there are lots of, more interesting things happening. So firstly comes the demon called Rakta Bija. Bija means like a drop, Rakta, of blood, because he has a boon. If even a drop of his blood falls on the ground, from that very drop is going to born another Rakta Bija. So as the Devi and various other Devis are fighting at this point, because the goddess herself, she multiplied herself. She took many more aspects in that battle, which is very symbolic. She primarily took aspects of 8 other goddesses, which are also known in other traditions as yoginis, Shaktis of the gods, Brahmani, Vaishnavi, Maheshwari, etc., who are primarily helping us to overcome over the negative qualities of our mind. So each of them is linked to a negative quality, like pride, like greed, desire, etc. So they are already fighting, but again, they are a little helpless because, again, every time they wound him, there is a drop of blood falling on the ground, and there's another Raktapija born from it. And this is when the goddess invokes Kalika, which is the aspect of Kali. And Kali literally just drinks this blood and reabsorbs it back, which again I find to be such a powerful metaphor. Because when we think about desire itself, desire is always directed outwards. And that's what Raktabija represents. The desire that never ends. Any drop falls on the ground, another one is born, and then another one is born. But what is so beautiful is that goddess Kali, she covers whole battlefield with her tongue. She takes this huge form and she just reabsorbs all those desires. Because if we try to chase those desires, not going to work. If we try to fight them and resist them, also not going to work. We just give them more power, then there is even more of them. But what actually is the path we are shown here is to reabsorb it, bring it back. And then final battle is, of course, between Shumba and Nishumba. So firstly, one of the brothers, then another of the brothers, representing the I and mine, the final obstacles on spiritual path, this identification that I am actually still doing something, right? That I still want to hold and cling onto everything I identify with and all of my expectations. And she also defeats them both in very different ways. It would take probably a little too long time to dive into that right now, but eventually even they are defeated. So I think it's, really beautiful to read, especially for the details of those stories, because there's so much into that. And for me, whenever I read those descriptions, especially of Mahalakshmi and Mahasaraswati, what was really striking me when the goddess is described, the goddess in the middle of the battle, is when she is lifting her sword or using any other weapon against the demons, she is not described as being in a very angry and ferocious state, actually. she is described as having a gentle smile on her face, which means she actually represents the capacity to stay, to, very compassionate and have that grace and elegance also when we are dealing with those very difficult qualities. Because the battles of life, the obstacles, the inner demons, they are not going to disappear just like that. But we can learn to be more, I would say, graceful almost, towards them, because she is the mother. She's the universal mother. She even created those demons in the first place. So she does have compassion to them as well. And that's a beautiful part of it. That's something that always inspires me, I think, the most in Devi Mahatmya, that we can learn how to also navigate our own inner battles with similar grace, without necessarily being very ferocious and very overwhelmed, but actually trying to really be very, very centered.
Thank you for sharing that again so beautifully. And I just love hearing how you describe it, and I'm excited. I'm re-listening every day, so it gets integrated, because every time you listen and in different parts of life and different
Absolutely.
experiences, it really helps. And maybe for listeners, let's say if someone is really interested in reading it, is there a specific translation in English that you prefer? Do you have, or do you maybe also share with the audience if you have any courses on this? Or I know you do Vedic astrology and other types of courses for those who are curious and want to learn more.
So Devi Mahatmya has a couple of translations. I think the most famous one, I don't remember the name of the author, but that's a really good one. So let me just quickly find this out. Where is this one? Because that was a really nice one. Goodness, I'm really bad with names, English ones.
No, it's hard to remember. I
Yeah.
usually remember the covers of books more.
I do remember the cover also. That's the thing, but I can't search by cover. I do remember the cover so well because it's from a very famous author, actually, and it's a very good one. It also goes to these secret chapters of. Oh, is that the one? I think I found this. Just give me a moment. Oh, yes. So that's the one. This is, it's called In Praise of the Goddess. That's the actual title. And then subtitled the Devi Mahatmya, and its meaning is by Devadatta Kali. Yeah. So it's a very, very nice one. I really like this translation. And also the explanation that we can find there is I would say very much in line with what other acharyas have spoken as well. So, and it's written in a very, I would say, approachable way, because some translations of Devi Mahatmya are sometimes very old and not always, so easy to digest. But this one is very, very good. So I definitely recommend that. I also did a course called Journey with the Goddess, where we actually go through Devi Mahatmya exactly in that way how it was structured, so over a period of 9 days. And we go also through the core mantras and prayers for Devi Mahatmya as well, and try to actually meditate with them and to a degree embody them as well, of course, because I do believe that whenever we read any scripture, be it any Purana, Bhagavad Gita, or Devi Mahatmya, it's not just enough to read. We need to find a way really to make it part of us, to integrate that knowledge, because then we can benefit much more from it. So, and of course, for those who are interested, I'm also doing Vedic astrology courses. That's my primary profession as well. I'm actually starting a new course very soon. Actually, tomorrow I have introduction class, the Navagraha course about the 9 planets. So
Oh,
That's there
beautiful.
too.
And it's also recorded, right? For those who are, because since
Oh,
this
yes.
episode is
Yeah.
coming out. Okay. And the course on the goddess, where can people find that? Is that also in the Discovering Universe, or is it on a different platform?
So it's also there. It's on actually Academy part of our Discovering Universe page. So it's
Okay.
academy.discoveringuniverse.com.
Okay, great. I'll also link to that so people can find, and to the YouTube channel. And I think that we have a lot of more topics to talk about. I feel like this was so beautiful, and to start off the journey for people, and it's inspired me so much. And I'm wondering if there's anything else from the Devi Mahatmya that is important to share right now, or if you want to maybe close with a closing mantra as well.
Absolutely. I think that the most important part, for me, when it comes to reading any scripture, and especially a scripture like Devi Mahatmya, that even if the listeners maybe will go and try to just read through the scripture or maybe just listen to it, is try as much as you can to really allow your imagination to see those things, to really go deeply into that. Because I personally, I'm such a believer in the power of metaphor. I do believe that some things are just better transmitted if we actually experience them versus just read the words. So it really helps to actually see that, visualize that, meditate upon that. Absolutely. So yeah, I would actually love to close with the mantra from Devi Mahatmya itself, one of the closing prayers, which honors the goddess as present in all beings. This is actually from the fourth chapter of Devi Mahatmya, the end of the chapters dedicated to Mahalakshmi. Just a short part of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Om. या देवी सर्वभूतेषु शक्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ओम् Thank you so much for having me. I'm very grateful to be here.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing, and all of the work you're doing. I'm so excited for everyone to listen. And thank you, everyone who's listened today. And I'll share all the links in the show notes so you can continue working with Achala and her beautiful work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.